If you're running Klipper and you've ever used the web UI to update your Klipper version, there's a good chance you're running multiple versions of Klipper right now. And that could cause some very strange issues. I discovered this the hard way while I was trying to install Eddy-NG. My probe started failing. I was getting weird error messages, and I was even struggling to connect to my printer. And what I discovered helped me to see what could be causing a lot of the really kind of strange Klipper issues I've run into over the years that I've been using it. Now, for this video, my goal was simple. I wanted to just install Eddy-NG, and that process looked fairly easy. You just clone the repo, run the install script, do a little bit of configuration, update the printer config, and you're good to go. And I thought this was going to go smooth, be an easy video, but that's not actually how it worked out. Initially, things looked like they were going very well, but then I started running into tap issues every time I tried to run the tap calibration. It just wouldn't calibrate. And my first assumption was, okay, Joe, you've misconfigured something. So look through the configuration settings. And I went through everything and it looked okay. So when you're running into an issue like that, you try and eliminate the variables and get to a known working state. And that's what I did. I went ahead and completely reverted back to mainline Klipper and got everything working at that point. Then I thought, okay, what could be my possible problems? It could have been an Eddy install issue. It could have been something was misconfigured. AI told me that my Python version may be an issue. And then there was an issue that I didn't think about. So I began with the Eddy and I went ahead and went through the installation process. I had already done it once, but this time I tried to actually read the documentation as opposed to just winging it. Um, and it installed fine, pretty much the same as previous. So I got the configuration all set up as well. And then I went ahead and went through all the steps that AI recommended for me to upgrade my Python version. But I was still having the issue. And that led me to a new discovery. I realized that my Klipper host, the Raspberry Pi, my printer mainboard, and the Eddy were all using different versions of the Klipper firmware. See, Klipper runs in a distributed system. So each system has a version of the Klipper firmware, and the Klipper host then sends instructions and gets information back from each one of the MCUs that are connected to that Klipper host. Now, in my case, I had the host, which was the Raspberry Pi. I had the printer mainboard, which is one of the MCUs. And then I had the BTT Eddy, which was an additional MCU. You could even have additional things like different CAN devices, and each one of these would have an MCU as well. When you go through the Klipper UI and you tell it to update Klipper, I don't know why, but I just assumed that it was updating all my devices. And that was foolish of me because you have to compile the firmware for the specific device that you want Klipper on and then flash that device. So having the web not only update your host device, but all the connected devices, now that I look back, seems a little foolish that I thought that. Now, let me make an important note of clarification because I got this comment and I think he called out something that is extremely valuable for all of us to know. You do not have to update the Klipper firmware on each of your MCUs every time you update Klipper on your host. The challenge becomes that every time you update the host, that version of Klipper gets more and more recent while these are getting older and older. So the more deviation you have between what your Klipper host is running and what your MCUs are running, the more likely you are to see weird errors. Now, you'll eventually get to a point where they update the protocol for Klipper and you'll start getting MCU protocol errors because then Klipper host is not even able to communicate with the MCUs any longer. And then you have to update the firmware. The larger the deviation between your Klipper versions on your host and your MCUs could cause just some weird errors. And that's what I was seeing. So I decided to update my Klipper host to the latest version. And then I recompiled different versions of the firmware for each one of my MCUs, and I flashed them so that we were on the same Klipper version across the board. I really hoped this would make it so that Eddy-NG just started working flawlessly, but actually that wasn't my problem. And Eddy-NG was a different problem that I haven't solved yet. So what did I actually fix? Well, if you remember in my BTT Eddy video where I was initially installing and setting it up, step 5 was about temperature calibration. I was never able to get that step to work. It just failed and it disconnected my Klipper host from my printer every time I tried to run it. Well, after this update where I got all my firmwares in line and on the same version, I was able to successfully run step 5 and temperature calibrate my BTT Eddy. And so I've been printing with that printer now flawlessly, and I haven't needed Eddy-NG. It would seem to me then that it was an MCU version mismatch that was likely causing that issue in the BTT Eddy setup process. I think my Eddy-NG issues may be because I have multiple printers running off the same host device and I have something that I'm just not setting up correctly. I, I don't know. If you have any ideas, please put them in the comments below because I haven't given up on Eddy-NG. I would like to use it, but at this point, I just can't figure out why it's not working. I thought I might just spin up an entirely new configuration on one of my printers and just see if I can get it working on that. So that may be what I do next. And I honestly debated whether I should make this video at all because, I completely failed installing Eddy-NG. But I did think what I learned was interesting and understanding a little bit more about how the different MCUs and the Klipper firmwares work and the importance of updating and realizing that I don't really have to update in the web UI every single time there's a new Klipper version. That kind of gives me peace of mind in terms of the maintenance of a Klipper system. Anyway, I hope this information was helpful. It was definitely something that was cool for me to learn. And until next time,